This is the new base model MacBook Pro 14 with the redesigned chassis, new chip, and more ports. Right when you take it out of the box, you notice how much thicker the design looks, even though it's actually around the same as the MacBook Pro 13. I appreciate the focus on functionality this time around. As you would expect from a MacBook, the whole laptop feels very rigid with nearly no flex on the lid or keyboard deck. This is the $2,000 model with an 8-core CPU, 14-core GPU, 16 gigs of unified memory, and a 512 gig SSD. On the left, you have the return of the MagSafe power connector, 2 Thunderbolt 4 ports, and a headphone microphone jack. On the right is an HDMI 2.0 port, not 2.1, so it does not support 4K 120. Another Thunderbolt 4 port, and an SD card slot. All of the Thunderbolt 4 ports can be used to charge in addition to the MagSafe connector. Fast charge is also available on all of the Thunderbolt 4 ports for this 14-inch model. The battery life in the first day has been pretty good. I clocked in around 10 hours before I needed to charge it, and it did charge to that 50% mark in around 30 minutes as advertised. Okay, let's talk about the display. It's a mini LED like you would find on the new iPad Pros with ProMotion. So that's an adaptive refresh rate up to 120 Hz. I use high refresh rate displays on all of my other laptops, and I kind of find it difficult to go back to 60 Hz. So I'm glad that they brought it to the MacBook. In my opinion, it makes a huge difference in the perceived speed of the device, and it makes all of the operating system animations look smoother and snappier. It's an HDR panel, and it has up to 1000 nits of sustained brightness and 1600 nits of peak brightness, which looks absolutely amazing in person. And now video creators can have a full HDR workflow on their laptop without the need of an external display. I'm also happy that they went with the mini LED instead of something like OLED on this device, as OLED is less consistent with color accuracy. This is especially important for people who use their MacBooks for color accurate work such as graphic design. And unlike the iPad Pro, I didn't notice any significant blooming in high contrast situations. Of course, we have the controversial notch at the top. I know everyone has an opinion on it, and honestly at first, I thought it was pretty strange. But after a day of use, I don't really notice it most of the time. When in full screen apps like Final Cut Pro, the top bar becomes black and the menu will show on hover. The notch is nearly impossible to see at this point. It makes it a strange experience when the cursor hides behind it. If the application's menu items exceed the space on the left, the following menu items will appear on the right side of the notch. And if you use a third-party menu bar manager like iStat Menus, you'll have less space to show active items. I don't think this will affect the vast majority of people, but it is unusual. But at least the notch houses a good 1080p webcam with impressive microphones. This will definitely be useful for those Zoom meetings and FaceTime. So Apple removed the touch bar and replaced it with full-size function keys. I know there are some people who liked it, but I personally am grateful that it's gone. I use the function keys very frequently when doing software development work and found the touch bar to be quite annoying. Even though you could set the touch bar to show only function keys, I'm a touch typer, so not having physical keys to feel for really disrupt my workflow. Despite what Apple says, I don't think this keyboard feels like a mechanical keyboard. I do, however, really like the typing experience on this. The keys have good travel and a very satisfying clicky feel to them. The edges feel sharper to me than the previous design as well, and they begin hurting my wrists after a short period of time. Other than that, it's a great typing experience. And of course, below that is the huge trackpad. Still the best trackpads on any laptop. The new speaker system sounds really incredible. They are louder and clearer than the last generation 16-inch MacBook Pro by around 5 decibels, which is really impressive considering it's a smaller chassis. Okay, so running a few benchmarks, and this base M1 Pro is a reasonable upgrade over the standard M1 and beating the previous generation MacBook Pro 16i9 on every test. Exporting a 6-minute 4K video in Final Cut is significantly faster than the standard M1 and faster than my i9 MacBook Pro. The actual experience of using this machine for video editing is really great as well. Not a single stutter editing 4K videos, navigating the timeline, or adding effects. And it maintains that same performance even when it's unplugged, which is unfortunately not the case for Windows laptops. So you shouldn't buy this laptop if gaming is the top priority for you. But with that said, while most games are only available or are best on Windows machines, there are still a ton of good games that you can play on the MacBook if you're looking to pass the time on a business trip or whatever. I tested a few Steam games in my library that were compatible and was really impressed with the results and the overall experience. Games like Hades and Disco Elysium look incredible on this XDR display. Now, because the internal display does not have a typical resolution, the recommended resolution varies by game. You can obviously adjust this to find the best balance between resolution and performance for you. And then, of course, you can also hook it up to an external display to use a more traditional resolution. It takes a while to get these fans to start running, and even when they do, they are so quiet, I can't even really hear them. I literally had to put my ear up to the keyboard deck to hear anything. The tools I use to test the internal temperatures are not updated to use with these new chips at the moment. But I will say that the chassis stayed completely cool to the touch on the top of the keyboard deck and on the bottom. Yeah, so overall, my first impressions of the new 14-inch MacBook are very positive. I actually just purchased the 16-inch with the M1 Max for my workflow, which just arrived today. So I upgraded the SSD and it added a few extra days to the shipping. But I will be reviewing that on the channel, so subscribe if you want to see that. And I do plan to have more coverage of these devices in the coming weeks, so let me know what you want to see in the comments below. Thanks, and I hope to catch you in the next one.